Hello there. It's always a pleasure coming your way with Medical Mondays with Dr. O. Medical Mondays brings you the views and thoughts of experts and professionals in the health and medical field. This platform is not to establish care, but rather arm you with all the relevant information you need to make healthy choices in life. The mantra, strong health, strong future. This evening we'll be talking about self-health and self-actualization with the founder and CEO of digital health startup HealthWheel. Remember, the Medical Monday is on your YouTube channel, and so subscribe, hit the likes on your way in and out, and make sure you share the link. Dr. Toyin Okpesami is the brain behind Medical Monday. She is a fellow of the American Academy of HIV Medicine, family practitioner and CEO of Gennesaret Medical Center in Maryland, and she's committed to changing lives through healthcare. Dr. O, you're welcome. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Gustav. And welcome everyone to Medical Mondays with Dr. O. I greet everyone from, the African continent, Britain, all over the US. Welcome. Today, we have our very own Obafemi Ayanbadejo, a member and significant contributor on the 2000 Ravens Super Bowl championship team. So he was a Super Bowl winner with Ravens and has played with many other teams in the NFL. Since retiring though from professional football, he has immersed himself in the health technology space. That was after he got his MBA from the Johns Hopkins University in Maryland. I had the privilege of having interacted with Femi on different levels. He calls me Mama Femi because he's my son. So we welcome our very own Obafemi Ayanbadejo to the forum tonight to encourage us and give us some health tips. So Femi, over to you.
Thanks, Dr. O. I really appreciate the introduction, and I really appreciate the jollof rice and the chicken on Saturday night. It was outstanding. Thank you for that as well. And the plantains. I had a really good time. Thank you for celebrating my birthday with me. It meant a lot to me.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So what I like to do is, keep this very simple and straightforward. I don't want to talk in esoteric terms or make things difficult for people to understand. I think health needs to be simple, but there also has to be a bit of accountability and truth when we talk about health, because I think the biggest issues we have society-wide and as individuals is kind of the lies we tell ourselves and the lies we tell each other about what works and what doesn't work. So my kind of mission is always to be truthful and honest and let the data tell me how we're supposed to act and behave. And hopefully I can earn your trust throughout this conversation that when you hear me say something, you'll believe that I put a lot of effort and research behind everything that I've developed. And a lot of the things that I share come from me. I don't take things from that. I don't take a particular curriculum or a particular approach without giving people credit. But I also believe that in the world that I live in, it's on me and it's on people on the front lines when it comes to health technology to also create new tools and talk about the philosophy behind them. And what I really want to do is talk about my view on self-health and self-actualization. And for those of you with psychology backgrounds, my undergraduate degrees in psychology, I'm a big fan of Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. I think that has a big place in where we start. And I also want you all to keep in mind that self-health can be broken up into kind of three categories. There's mental and emotional health, which kind of go hand in hand, and then there's physical health, right? And I think the mistake we make as practitioners, doctors, personal trainers, nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, is that we only treat one of those silos when all three are happening simultaneously and they all affect each other. It's kind of the chicken or the egg dilemma, right? You have people that are dealing with type 2 diabetes and obesity, but they're also dealing with mental health issues. Which one led to the other? Which one is exacerbating the other? The truth is, it doesn't matter because they coexist. And we must treat people as humans, not as individuals with an issue or a problem, but with the idea that there are many things happening and it's complicated. But the best we can do is try to be supportive and honest. So with that being said, as Dr. Oso eloquently mentioned, I am a human performance expert by trade. That's kind of what I call myself. I'm currently a certified nutritionist. I have been a personal trainer in the past. I've been in the fitness and wellness space for over 30 years, wearing many hats. As I mentioned, an athlete, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, a coach, the analytics side, as an entrepreneur, as a technologist, and obviously as a consumer. I love this space, and I use a lot of the tools that are being, built for individual and virtual digital consumption. I think the future is digital. And so, what is self-health? Self-health is about teaching people how to manage their own health and get help when they need it from other professionals, but also the fact that self-health leads to self-actualization and optimization. And I think for a long time, many of us have functioned suboptimally, and we knew we weren't probably performing our best or feeling our best, but really didn't know what to do about it. And that's really what motivates me, is really trying to help people get away from being suboptimal and really understanding like what the best version of themselves kind of looks like. And I think a lot of times, in my opinion, and what I see kind of on the ground is the drivers of suboptimization. And to me, it's, once again, it's falsehoods, it's fear, and it's frustration. And so, almost everything negative we do to ourselves and each other kind of falls into the falsehood, fear, and frustration buckets. And, how do we get control back, right? What are the things that we can do to not be so reactive? And so, in this world of self-help, these 4 levers that I've created, and I'm sharing excerpts with you all on about my writings, is really a rubric or an internal set of items you constantly reflect on. And if you're centered, you understand that there's no such thing as perfection, only the pursuit of it, knowing you'll never actually attain it. And that's okay. I like the idea of shooting for perfection, knowing that I'll never be perfect. And I'm okay with that, because it's about the attempt that drives, I think, awareness and success. And so with that being said, let me get a little bit into kind of the 4 levers and how I look at them. The first lever is survival. The second lever is quality information and communication. The third lever is awareness. And then the fourth lever is what I call health performance, which is kind of the traditional health performance metrics that we tend to talk about: nutrition, exercise, sleep, recovery, supplementation. I honestly think that those are the last things that we should discuss. I actually think that survival, information, communication, and awareness should always come first, because those things are the foundation of self-actualization. And the nutrition and the sleep and the exercise stuff, that stuff, we think it's the hardest, but in my opinion, it's actually the easiest, because I think it's the least trivial. And I can answer questions about that if that doesn't make sense and what I mean by that. And what I really want to do is I want to break out some of these levers a little bit, and then I'll take some questions just to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. So when we talk about the first lever, which is survival, I summarize survival with what I call survival events. And these events are literal, they're figurative, they're subjective. Some survival events are not obvious to observers. They must be shared and articulated first person. Never judge another survival event or another person's trauma, and understand that there are 2 things that come from survival events. It's growth, and as I mentioned just a second ago, it's trauma. Survival events are kind of what teaches us how to adapt and how to deal with crisis situations. And if we look further into what I call survival events, there are 6 categories of survival events, summarized by the acronym PROOF. And there's 3 O's in this acronym proof, PROOOF. The first type of trauma that comes from this proof acronym is positive trauma. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, right? How can trauma be positive? Well, it can be, because trauma will force you to grow. And I think there's people in our lives that challenge us, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a friend of the family, a coach, a coworker. They can cause trauma for us, but that trauma is probably something we need, because their intent is probably good. And that phrase, iron sharpens iron, that's an example of positive trauma. We always tend to look at trauma negatively, right? The R in proof is random trauma. And I'll use my own life as an example. Growing up in Northern California, I was in a 7.1 earthquake as a kid. I still think about it all the time. It was an extremely traumatic experience. All of us have had many survival events, many traumatic events that have shaped the way that we view the world and the way that we view ourselves. And random trauma is due to no fault of your own. And we can think of thousands of things that happen every day across the planet that are random events of trauma that have indelible effects on people's lives. And sometimes we internalize that trauma as being our own fault, when in reality, it's not. We just happen to be at the wrong place or at the wrong time. That's an example of random trauma. And then a lot of you as doctors and people that are practitioners, there's occupational trauma, right? The things that you deal with at work, trying to help other people, the trauma that you internalize that's not your own, that you take home with you, and it affects your relationships and it affects you. We have to know how to separate that trauma from our lives and not let it eat us up. We can't swallow other people's trauma and survival events. Now, we want to help them, but we have to find some way to create these internal barriers where we're supportive and helpful, but we don't assume other people's trauma. We don't take in their survival events and then make it part of our own narrative. It's important to support people and help them while having, as best you can, some level of barrier. And I think understanding that occupational trauma, we hear it all the time. There's tons of teachers and doctors and even soldiers and cops that bring their work home with them, and it causes a level of chaos in their lives that ultimately they may not realize. So I want you guys to be mindful of that as well. And then the other O, so there's positive, there's random, there's occupational, and there's the trauma we cause ourselves, right? The self-inflicted wounds, the things that we do getting in our own way, getting in the way of our own progress. That is traumatic too sometimes, and it's self-inflicted. We all know people that are the cause of much of the trauma in their lives. For whatever reason, they can't seem to get out of their own way, and they're completely oblivious to it. But we see it, and we try to help them. It's really important to keep that in mind. The third O is the trauma that we cause to others. So the O is others, right? Maybe we are that person in someone's life who is toxic. We are the one getting in the way of someone's ability to self-actualize. There's something about the way we interact with certain people that we are causing a problem for them. I think a lot of times we think of ourselves, and obviously I'm not speaking to any individual here on this because I don't know anybody per se, except for a few people that are on here. But I do think that it's very easy to think that we are always on the receiving side of trauma, right? That people are always doing something to us. But the reality of it is that we do stuff to people too. And being aware of that and apologizing can go a really long way. It almost seems like sometimes people forgot how to say, I'm sorry. I don't think we hear that enough. I don't think we say that enough. And then the final kind of category in this proof acronym around trauma is family and friends, right? I think most studies say that most trauma comes from someone we know, whether it's a friend or a family member. And obviously just due to the closeness of having a friend or a family member, without going too far down a rabbit hole, that's kind of the origin of most trauma. It's usually people that are very close, people you work with, people you live with. So it's just important to really keep that in mind. And I think that really wrapping your head around this proof acronym, positive, random, occupational, the trauma we cause ourselves, the trauma we cause others, and then the trauma that comes from friends and family. These categories have a huge effect on the way we view the world and how we deal with the world. And so before we can experience growth, the growth benefits of trauma, and survival events, we must understand that survival events do not follow a deadline or a calendar, right? We may want to rinse ourselves or flush something traumatic that happened, but maybe mentally or emotionally, you're just not there yet. So sometimes these survival events and trauma, they have their own timeline, and it's okay. We should not force ourselves to get past something that we're not ready to get past yet. And it's okay to not be, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. And as you can see, a lot of the things that I'm talking about here are much more on the psychological, emotional end of the spectrum than on the human performance, nutrition, exercise end of the spectrum. Because as I said earlier, I think these things are far more important in the long run to our long-term mental, emotional, and physical health. And another thing that I'll leave you guys with is that the actual process of dealing with survival events, there's actually 5 steps in dealing with a survival event. What I did is when I was talking about the PROOF acronym and I was talking about growth and trauma, I was really kind of pulling out a thought on the second component to survival events. The first part is to survive, right? The most important thing in any survival event is to survive it, right? The second thing is to assess. Assess the event and assess the trauma that came with the event. The third part of dealing with a survival event is learning from said event. What are the lessons that you got after you assessed? The fourth, after you've learned, is to actually be able to deploy what you learned the next time a survival event that is either totally related or at least tangentially related to the event that you learned from, right? Survival events cover the full gamut of our life experiences. You know what I mean? They can seem so minimal and minuscule to an observer, but they mean everything to us. It can be an attack on our character. It could be an attack on the quality of our work. And as I said, it can be literal survival events that we deal with. As I mentioned, the earthquake that I was in as a kid. And so, I think that the ability to kind of navigate what I call survival events, trauma, and growth, to me, being able to complete all 5 steps, right? Survive, assess, learn, deploy. The last part is to share. There's a vulnerability and a truth and a level of freedom, something cathartic that comes with sharing our trauma. And I'm not saying everybody has to do this. We all share in our own way. Some of us are more extroverted. Some of us are more introverted. Some of us have a few close friends. Some of us have a bunch of good friends. It's always good to have somebody that you can kind of impart your wisdom on. There's a lot of wisdom on this. I can sense it. I can see it by the people, by all the doctors that are on here. And you guys all probably are doing this on your own without necessarily following these kind of the strategy that I've created. But the truth of the matter is that true actual self-actualization, in my mind, comes with transparency, vulnerability, and honesty. No matter what you went through, are you willing to share your experience as to save another person from going through that same trauma? Now, we all have kids, at least a lot of us on here have kids, right? And we know sometimes kids got to learn the hard way, right? They got to hit their head against the wall. There are some people that you might be able to spare a couple headaches, a couple bumps on the head by just imparting your wisdom and your knowledge upon them. And that's really what self-actualization is to me. It's really navigating these random survival events, the trauma that comes with it, and deploying the learning when it needs to be deployed. I think, if I'm being completely honest, what I see people do is I see them get stuck somewhere between assessing and learning. They know that what they're doing isn't appropriate. They know that they're not reacting in an appropriate manner or handling the stress or the trauma that they've been handed in an appropriate manner, but they still keep handling it the same way over and over again. What does that lead to? That leads to them being stuck. They never quite evolve. They want to move somewhere. They want to change their job. They want to get a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend. But at the end of the day, that same issue follows them everywhere they go because they're not aware enough to understand that they're not dealing with the actual problem, which is them. I see that a lot. And I'm sure a lot of you, we all have probably done that at some point or another. Before I go any further on trauma and survival, like I said, I purposely didn't create a deck here because obviously I'm writing this stuff up and I don't really want it out there in the ether at this point. But does anyone have any questions about any of that? I think it's pretty straightforward, but I know I covered a lot of ground really fast. But just to recap real quickly, remember there are 5 components to survival and survival events: survive, assess, learn, deploy, and share, right? And then the thing that I broke out the most was the trauma and the growth and the different kinds of trauma that there are. And the reason why I focus so intently on trauma is because I think it is really the driver of almost every human emotion and every human reaction. And as I said, trauma is big and small. It's literal and it's figurative. So I think if you think broadly and not like on Webster's definition of trauma, but how I'm trying to use my scalpel, so to say, and delineate these different kind of groupings of trauma and what I see as self-actualization and growth in dealing with it explicitly, not just hoping things get better, right? Actually having an approach that gives you some weapons to actually deal with trauma and recognize when you're getting in your own way, right? Any questions about any of that?
Deploy.
Deploy?
Yes.
What do I mean by that?
Can you just review that one?
Yeah, deploy. So a lot of times we find ourselves in the same traumatic situations over and over again. And I'll use me as an example. There's been times when I've been critiqued or coached and I didn't handle it well. I got sensitive, I overreacted, I felt attacked when in reality, somebody was trying to help me. And as I go through that video in my head over and over again, I knew later in time I would get critiqued again. And the lesson from that was that they're trying to help me. So the next time I'm feeling vulnerable and I'm feeling like someone's attacking me, I need to remember that they're not. So I need to deploy a different strategy in how I react. So instead of deploying anger or sensitivity, I deployed openness and understanding that somebody's trying to make me better, right? That's that positive trauma that I was trying to talk about. Somebody's trying to push me to be better. Deploying a strategy that serves me and not deploying a strategy that gets in my way. That's what I mean by deploy. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Excellent. Any other questions about that, Dr. O? Anybody?
You're encouraging us to act and not be reacting.
Yes. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you a bit of a rubric that I think deals with the real fundamentals of life, which is trauma and growth, and that there's different kinds of trauma, and that there is a sequencing to how we deal with trauma. And like I said, I want to be perfect, but I know I never will be, and that's okay. It's about the drive. It's about my intention. That's what I love about trying to be perfect. It's not that I'm going to be. My girlfriend is on this call right now, and I can tell you there's plenty of times when I am like a person who coaches people. She's also a person that coaches people. And her and I will have moments where we almost forget everything that we do for a living because we're humans, we're flawed. For whatever reason, we catch ourselves, and it doesn't last very long. But I think when you have quality relationships with people, you're gonna clash every once in a while, whether it's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your kids. I have 2 teenagers. They don't always listen to me. I don't always handle giving them advice well. And this sequencing that I'm giving, this idea of assessing, learning, deploying, and sharing, right? It keeps me in check. Because when I handle an event that I wasn't ready for, or when I know something is going to be a bit frictional, right? So there's going to be some type of, animosity. This is a way that I check myself to see if I handled it appropriately. And if I didn't, you know what I do? I apologize. And I say, you know what? I know what your intent was. I didn't handle that well. I should have reacted differently. And I think when you make yourself vulnerable and you apologize and you recognize your own flaws, everything else is so much easier in life. I think that there are many people that want to live a lie about their perfection, their intelligence, whatever it is. That's a heavy burden to carry. I'd rather recognize that I'm not going to be perfect, but that I have this internal locus, this rubric that I follow, that I always go back to. And it's not hard to do, right? Survive, assess, learn, deploy, share. Survive, assess, learn, deploy, share. Every day I say it to myself, have character, be humble, be honest, understand things. And when you make a mistake, own it. And I think that is the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself before you do anything else, in my opinion. And once again, I'm a nerd when it comes to exercise and nutrition and food and the data that comes with it. But none of that matters if you can't interact with people on a human level and be vulnerable and be honest. That's just my belief and my personal philosophy.
You know what? Coming from someone of your caliber, this is deep. And thank you for being open. Thank you for sharing, this depth with us.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's resonating. And I promise you all, if we were all together in a room where we could talk and interact, this would be a free-flowing discussion. I'd have a whiteboard up. I'd probably have a deck going simultaneously where you could really digest and process the flow of information, and it would make a lot more sense. But I think that a lot of times, even when I talk to very learned people that are on here, I think what makes what I'm doing really deployable, right, is the simplicity of it. I don't think this is overly complicated. I have given a very similar talk to 8th graders and they got it. You know what I mean? Of course, I used words and vocabulary that was more at their level. But what I'm saying isn't really complicated. I think any high school student, any college student, anybody that has some command of the English language is going to understand what I'm saying. Because what I'm really talking about, it's an emotional thing. It's an awareness thing, right? And what I mentioned in the beginning is that there's 4 levers. We've only talked about 1 lever. There's 4 of them. So can you imagine how long I would be on here with you if I broke out every lever into its fine detail? And what I'm going to do is this. Let me just touch on the other levers so you can kind of see how the whole globe and the whole world that I'm talking about in regard to how I believe trauma and growth kind of drive everything. The second lever, and it's not on accident, is information and quality information. And I think one of the biggest issues, and you've all probably seen this with people that you deal with, and people that you live with or people that you interact with, is that people are not honest. There's only one truth. There's not 5 truths. There's not alternative facts. There's one set of facts. And the issue that we have today is people want to use Facebook as if it's Webster's dictionary. It's not. Facebook is not a place to be getting health information about, how to survive and live and avoid COVID and treatment and vaccines. That's not the place for it. And unfortunately, there are people that would rather get information from their friends, baby's mom's dad about stuff and act as if it's factual, when in reality it's the lowest form of information that you can have, which is hearsay. There's no scientific data, there's no metadata, there's no facts. It's just emotion and politics and a lot of craziness. So what I try to tell people is that information and the quality of that information matters. And if you're not going to vet the information that you get, then you're just living with a bag over your head. You're an ostrich with your head buried in the sand, because the reality of it is that if you're dealing with truth and truthful information, you may not like the facts, but at least you can make decisions that will let you live and let your friends and family live, and you'll survive. And you may not like it, but it's the truth. And I think one of the things that we've seen with the spread of misinformation is that there's a lot of people that got in their own way, right? They did not understand that you're dealing with a survival event right now and you don't even know it. And one of the decisions that you made in regard to assessing and learning and deploying, you never did. And it's gotten you in trouble. So I can take the model of survival events and I can throw it against anything. And I guarantee you it's going to stand up because it's very flexible. It stands up against COVID. You can try it. You can think about people in your life that didn't follow the rules or didn't want to do certain things. And it's tragedy, right? There's a lot of tragedy and trauma around that. So I think that beyond surviving a survival event, I think the way that we communicate, because the actual second lever is information and quality communication, right? It's not just getting good information, it's how you share that information. What's the point of having good information if you don't share it in a way that people can digest it? It doesn't have any value. It's a secret. And when I played in the NFL, we had this rule, right? Because if you didn't talk to your teammate would get his head knocked off, right? So a lot of things that we would say would be like, hey, don't keep secrets, like you need, like, tell me what I need to know so I can, do my job, right? Well, it's interesting how that analogy holds up in the real world, right? Why are people, don't keep a secret. If you know something that's good and it's going to help me and it's the truth and it's fact checked and you've done your research and your homework, please share that with me. I want that information. It's going to make my life better. It's going to help me avoid a survival event potentially, right? So communication quality and quality information is the second lever, not on accident. The third lever is what I call awareness. And awareness is complicated because we all probably know people that are not very self-aware. And let me give you an example. And once again, I like to use myself as to not offend anybody. I do Bikram Yoga every day. I love Bikram Yoga. I love the heat. I love the predictability of it. I know exactly what I'm getting into. It allows me to go into a place in my head that is part meditation, part creativity, part pain because of how hard and hot it is in there, right? And I spend that time really looking inward and creating, and the things that I share with you guys, a lot of it I was creating in my mind during Bikram Yoga. Now, you always have these people that come into Bikram Yoga, and if you want to know how to do Bikram, you can go anywhere in the world, and it's the same class. It's the same postures, it's the same breathing, it's the same words. It transcends all language. It goes above and beyond all borders, right? You can find a Bikram class anywhere and you know exactly what you're getting into. The best way to learn about how to do Bikram is to observe the people around you. All you got to do is watch. You don't got to talk. You don't got to say anything. Just look around the room. And it always is mind-boggling to me when people walk into a Bikram room. Nobody has shoes on, but these people will walk in with their shoes on. Nobody's talking. People will come in and start talking. Nobody is faced in some weird direction in the corner. Everyone is set up toward a mirror in a perfect direction. And all you had to do was walk in the room and just observe, right? Have some awareness about you're walking into a new space. The thing to do when you walk into a new space is to observe, in my opinion. You shouldn't be in there dictating anything. You're new to a space that other people may have possibly mastered. Maybe you should watch them a little bit before you start doing certain things, right? There's a ton of etiquette around Bikram Yoga. There's breathing etiquette. There's drinking water etiquette. There's a certain direction you face your mat. I, as a crazy type A person, love the discipline that comes with that, right? There's no guessing. There's no randomness. It is completely controlled. I love that. And I always find it mind-boggling when people walk in and are completely oblivious to this order that's in this room, and they're completely disrupting it, and they're not even aware of it. And what also is interesting to me is when people who have never done it come in and seamlessly in 2 seconds, they are observing the room and they fall right in line. They realize there's an etiquette happening. That tells me about a lot of people. So I always ask, are you an observer that comes in and learns what's happening and follows? Or do you just come in disruptive and start doing whatever the heck you want? I mean, to me, that's what awareness is about. And I think the cool thing about awareness is that we're all born with different levels of innate awareness, right? Some people just have it. They just know how to listen and how to pay attention, how to observe. And there's others that you need to like point it out to them, like, hey, like, that's not how you're supposed to do this. Let me show you how you're supposed to do it. And then they learn, right? They survive that little survival event, right? I checked them in a class and now I'm teaching them how to do it. And guess what? They're learning, they're assessing, they're deploying it in the class the next time, and then they're telling somebody else about their Bikram experience. Now, that might not be a real survival event, but that's what survival events are. It's something random and new that you weren't prepared for, and now you've learned and you're transcending that knowledge gap that you had. That's what awareness is, right? So imagine now when you take, and one of the things about awareness that I love is that, and I say this phrase quite a bit, self-awareness plus selflessness equals self-actualization. Because you can't be self-aware without being selfless. You have to know sometimes that it's your job to be maybe in a support role, or maybe not even in a support role, just in a be ready role. You know, we all can't lead all the time, right? And I think one of the things I learned about sports is that each task, depending on that week's game plan, I may be in a lead role or I may be in a support role. And if that's what's required at that time, being self-aware and maybe deploying a little bit more selflessness is what's required. I'm okay with that, because next time I'm going to be in the lead role and someone else is going to have to be more selfless. That's the nature of life. And so I think that, once again, self-awareness, selflessness, and self-actualization, it's the third lever for a reason. Because if I just started with that without giving you the survival, the trauma, the proof acronym, the information quality, the communication stuff, self-awareness is just going to be some random thing. But now I'm building on top of stuff, right? As I get further away from trauma, we're really building on a true pyramid, like Maslow's pyramid, right? Where you have kind of the more simple needs at the bottom, but as you get further up, self-actualization is at the top. Well, that's what we're working toward. And the fourth lever, which is what I call health performance and traditional health performance metrics, it's the last one because I feel there's a part of me that knows that not everybody is in a position to have a Fitbit or to have a nutritionist or to have a state-of-the-art gym or to have be in a place in their life where they don't have to worry about clothing, food, shelter, and survival. Like, I know that that's not where everybody starts. So I purposely made that the last lever because I think that we all have to be in a certain place to experience the benefits of being able to say, oh, I'm just going to eat egg whites today and oatmeal with chopped fruit. Sometimes people are just going to eat whatever they have, right? They're not even thinking about quality food. They're just thinking about surviving. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that there are a ton of us that have experiences. And I'll just share a little something about me that you all might not know. I'm sure you don't know. But my father is from Ijebu, and I lived in Lagos for 2.5 years with no running water, no electricity. Me, my brother, my dad, and 2 other kids that he had before my mom moved to Nigeria with him and us. And my life has only gotten better and improved since then. And I remember what it was like to not have those things. It would be completely arrogant of me to think that everybody is going to be concerned with a Fitbit and activity tracker, knowing where I come from. So that's why I put that last, because it is last. At the end of the day, it's last. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing is surviving. The next most important thing is information and communication. The third most important thing is self-awareness. The last important thing, but still important, is all the cool things that we get to do here in the US with all the nice gadgets that we have. And yes, I am a technologist and I'm building techie gadgets, but it's not past me that I don't forget how this all started for me. So I'm in a very lucky position. I feel blessed. And yeah, so those are the 4 levers. I can talk for like 3 hours straight. I promise you, I could just keep going. And you guys, your eyes will roll back in your head, but let me just stop there where it's at 7:45 right now. Get off my soapbox. You know what I mean?
I saw Madam VP raise her hand. I told you about NAPAC, Nigerian American Political Action Committee.
Yes, you did on Saturday. Yeah.
Madam VP is one of our founders. She's really the mother of NAPAC. And I saw her raise her hand. So, Madam VP, go ahead, ma. I'm asking you to unmute to ask your question. Madam VP. Okay, so she's not, I don't know. I'm sure she's trying to unmute. Does anyone have a question in between there? I have you.
She can type her question into the chat as well.
Yeah, well, I know her. She'll unmute as soon as she's able to. So thank you so much for this depth. In fact, it looks to me that it's actually, like you said, self-actualization. We all, whether we want to believe it or not, whether we want to not even believe, whether we want to admit to it or not, go through trauma. But how we handle it is really what you're trying to communicate to us, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think I have a tattoo on my arm, and you probably can't really see it that well, but it says character in adversity and humility in prosperity. I think that when we get put into challenge, like I think for me, the thing that I always come back to is having like being graceful, right? And understanding that things aren't always going to go my way, and that I keep fighting and I keep grinding and I keep pushing regardless of the problems that I'm confronted with, but that I do it with character, right? I never lose who I am in the process, no matter what someone else does, because I have to control me. And I can't, obviously I can't speak for other people, but I do know that when I see people that are my peers that are successful, I don't think having great character or being humble means that you're quiet or that you're a pushover or that you don't get angry or that you don't make mistakes. I don't think it means any of that. I just think that it means that if you feel yourself getting out of line, that you're not too big ever to own a mistake or to change how you view and handle something. And I think when it comes to mental health and emotional health and ultimately our physical health, right? I think this clarity on managing our emotions the right way and the mental health and clarity that comes with honesty, I think is so important. And for many years, I didn't know how to articulate it, but it was something that I've always synthesized and kind of wrapped my head around and have always come back to. You know, my stepdad has a PhD in psychology, and I think that I got to sit in a lot of his classes when I was a kid. And there was something about understanding how the mind works and how emotions work. And obviously, you know, there's hormones play a role, right? Genetics play a role. All these things play a role. And so I just think the more information that one can have around how to manage those things and understanding that random events are going to happen, tests are going to happen, survival events are going to happen, having a talk with yourself before they happen and preparing yourself for the good, the bad, and the ugly, that goes a long way in how you come out of it and how you manage it. And I think for me, that's been a lifelong mission to articulate it and deploy it, right, in a way that people can process. I really enjoy that, dealing with that struggle for some reason. I don't know what it is, but I enjoy that. Abby, you have a question?
Hi, Femi. How's it going?
Hey, Abby, how are you?
Great. First off, I want to say amazing job. I'm thoroughly enjoying everything that you've spoken about. In fact, I think that it's the perfect topic. I wasn't really expecting you to go this route, but I think that the whole trauma, you know, talking about trauma or whatever is not something that is discussed enough. And, you know, most of us on this platform, even though it's a very diverse platform, a lot of us here are Africans. And, you know, you talked about living in Nigeria for a little bit. You know, like when you talk about trauma, a lot of people are like, oh, what is that? I don't, trauma, what is trauma? You know, people don't really acknowledge that, you know, living in Africa or living in Nigeria, I will talk as a Nigerian. I think I can really speak for myself. And I would say, like, you know, we're constantly, you know, going through traumatic events. Now, you know, you have people like us, you know, the younger generation who are able to, you know, recognize when we are traumatized and, you know, accept it and we see it. But, you know, for the older folks, they don't even, you know, they're traumatized and they don't even know they're traumatized. I think the main question here for me is, and I think for everyone is, how do you know when you've been affected by trauma? How do you recognize, you know, when you've been affected by trauma? I think that, you know, it comes in different forms. And it's not just, oh, somebody beat you or, you know, you were bullied. It comes in so many different ways. And it affects you in different ways. So I think that what I would love for you to kind of like touch on is, how do you recognize when you've been traumatized, and, you know, what do you do about it?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I appreciate your honesty there. I think that the whole reason I have these kind of 5 steps is it's not for anyone to call anybody out on survival, assessing, learning, deploying, and sharing, but there's a clear delineation between assessing and learning and deploying. And I'm asking everyone right now, just in their mind, no one needs to raise a hand, no one needs to say anything. Do you find yourself in the same arguments with the same people all the time? And then you have to ask yourself, what are you learning about that? You know, did you assess the situation? What did you learn? And are you deploying anything from what you learned the next time the same thing happens all over again? And I purposely touched on this, but I don't think I went deep enough on it, is that we have people that constantly find themselves in survival events. It's self-inflicted based on their inability to make the jump from learning to deploying. The learning to deploying jump is the biggest jump in self-awareness that you can make, right? The ability to recognize, like, I've been here before. You know, if I make a right turn, I know what happens. And I've already made 3 right turns and I've ended up in a not good situation. Let me make a left turn this time. That's really, for me, what helps people kind of check themselves on these survival events and how they handle them. And you hit the nail on the head in a couple different ways. We deal with some type of survival event as people all the time, right? And depending on what situation you're in on a daily basis, where you live, who you're living with, there's so many different ways that survival events can show themselves. And once again, big and little and completely subjective. What things do you have control over to change your environment, right? And then if you come to the conclusion that it's you, what can you do differently about how you handle the trauma that either you're causing or that someone's causing for you? And one of the things that I talk about in a chapter of this huge Word doc that has like 100,000 words in it, it revolves around the role of people in our lives. You have people that are difficult, right? But they make your life better. Like they challenge you to be good. Now they might make your life harder, but they make your life better because they're challenging you in a positive way. Then you have people and events in your life that are negative and toxic, right? And Stockholm syndrome is a real thing, right? Toxicity in relationships is a real thing. And I think it takes the self-awareness thing is so important because there's this internal discussion you have to have with yourself about your environment, how you handle yourself, and how people that are supposed to care about you treat you and how you treat them. And I think that if you constantly see the same event happening over and over again, the same toxicity over and over again, and there's more trauma than there is growth, ding, 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 you have a problem and you need to address it. And I think the biggest problem that I see is that people don't address it until they're absolutely forced to. And when I say forced to, I mean, it could be police, it could be some type of horrible event that, blew things up in a way that it's irreparable, but we can actually intervene on our own before that and walk away, move away, make a change before it really blows up in our face. But unfortunately, I think it's human nature that we get comfortable in our trauma, and instead of fixing it before it gets past a point of no return, we let it blow up in our face. And guess what? That repeats itself over and over and over again. So Abby, that's the best answer that I can give you. And I know it's kind of vague, but I think it's the best I can do just in general terms.
Yeah, it kind of works. I think that you went more, in the deep sense. I wanted a little bit more simpler form for everyone else to, be able to understand, like when, they're being traumatized, like, do you get like headaches? Are you scared?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Those type of things, even though, the response given was great, but I think that went even deeper than, than the basics. But yeah, how do you recognize just, regular symptoms, like signs of something happened to you, and it's traumatizing you? How do you know when you are traumatized?
Yeah, that's different for each person because we all internalize trauma differently. Some people can have a traumatic experience and go grab a coffee and go for a walk, and you'll see them and they'll smile and they'll act like everything's great. You know what I mean? That's a really difficult answer for me to give because I think we all respond differently. Obviously, shock and like real trauma, we know what that looks like. But I think that what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about, is more these consistent micro traumas that build over time. But we have an ability to be resilient. We protect ourselves psychologically. We act like everything's okay. I can't give a specific clue around, what a sign might look like, but I think internally, there's a feeling that we all probably have about an event or something that continues to happen over and over again. And what I would say is like, if you see a repetitive, what I call, I guess we can call it a micro trauma or a repeat survival event, where it's not a place that you want to be, but it's happening over and over again, I would just encourage someone to ask, like, well, why is that happening over and over again? Like, what can you do differently to make sure it doesn't continue to happen? From a symptomatic standpoint, Abby, it's really hard for me to give a ton of insight around what trauma looks like, other than the obvious signs of trauma when something is really traumatic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you definitely made a point that it makes a lot of sense. We do, I guess, respond differently. I know when I'm traumatized, yeah, See, mommy's laughing there because she knows, and we both respond to, we respond differently. And I think, interacting with all types of people, you are right. We do respond, differently to different, whatever traumatic events happen to us. And I think that even makes it, an even more difficult job, I guess, for the psychologists and people who deal with stuff like this, who try to help people get out of, their traumatic state or whatever. It's difficult because there's like no one, medicine for everybody. Everybody has different issues and they, respond differently. So you have to kind of like tailor it to individual and stuff like that. So yeah, but yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And one of the other things I'll say, and I don't want to be dismissive of anybody, but I think that I'll use my NFL experience as a backdrop. That way, it's abstract enough that it's not honing in on any one individual or any one person's approach to things. All things must evolve, and I know that as we get older, we're actually less likely to evolve. And as we get older, we're less likely to be open-minded about things and to try things a different way or to share things a different way. But the truth of the matter is, and I'll use the NFL, the NFL is a brutal game, and the NFL has had to adapt or die. A lot of parents stopped letting their kids play football. There's been a lot of changes to the game, a lot of new rules. The old folks would say, oh, the game's still soft now. It's not hard anymore. No, football it's going to be a tough sport no matter what. Removing some violent hits that literally change the outcome of someone's life, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with making the game safer. With that being said, it's okay as adults, right, that we try something new. It's okay that we take a different angle on something because we have to evolve. And as kids, interact with each other, and how I just love when I see high school kids now and junior high school kids now. There are so many things that they're so much better at than we were. And this narrative that kids are soft and kids aren't smart and the kids today, they're terrible. No, I don't agree with that narrative at all. I think the kids growing up now are amazing. I think the tools that they have, the way they look at the world, the kindness, the empathy that they show, I love that. And I don't think it's ever too late to adopt a couple things that kids do. I don't care if you're 50, 60, 80, 90, it doesn't matter. I would strive for that if it's possible. You know what I mean? And Abby, that goes back to what you were saying a little bit about how sometimes I know that some of us have been through a lot of things. And so our bar for trauma is very high because we've been through so many traumatic things. Like what I would consider trauma, some person next to me might laugh at me and say, that's not trauma. But remember what I said, the first rule is trauma is subjective. Trauma is first person. No one's ever to tell anybody about what they're going through not being traumatic to them.
Right.
Thank you so much. I have Dr. Eniola Ogumefun has his hand raised. I'm asking that you unmute. He's also a NEPAC member. Show your screen if you can.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Obafemi Ayanbadejo. I wanted to say that, does he know how to drum? No, I'm going to, I have a question, but I know Ayan means drum. So I'm just trying to, just to give that there. So one thing I want to ask is about being able to adapt to different situations and being able to stay strong irrespective of the experience or what we may call trauma. What will you say about, being able to adapt to different situations and keep going, in life, wherever we find ourselves? For example, people of color, especially, working in corporate America, I would say African Americans, there has been some studies that say that, working in corporate America for Black people at times may cause an increase in blood pressure, some form of stress, but it's not something that they can just work out, but they have to find a way to adapt to that kind of situation. So what will you say about that? Thank you.
Yeah, you're asking a very, very good question. And I think that in a lot of environments, obviously people of color, we know that equity and fairness, voter rights, corporate culture, we know that we deal with a whole different animal that unfortunately Well, I guess fortunately for them, you know, white folks don't have to deal with that. And, you know, also there's situations that women have to deal with that men, you know, don't have to deal with, right? So we have these tiered kind of dichotomies based on race and gender that are problematic for people that are in more vulnerable positions. And I think it's the job of leadership and corporate culture to be mindful and aware, right? It's not an accident that awareness is a huge part of the 4 levers. And I think every lever that I talk about is micro and macro, right? They're foundational, right? They should be things that we should strive for in home and at work. And I think that the best thing that we can do as people of color is to share our experiences with people in positions of power. Now, you might not think that they're going to listen to you, and you might not think that it's worth it, but I guarantee you there's a lot of people that are in positions of power that have no idea. If you were to go share a peer-reviewed study on blood pressure related issues to the workplace, and there's probably a ton of other documentation out there in regard to the issues that people of color and women deal with in particular in the workplace. I think it's important to raise those questions, right? But also I think us being victimized at times for our gender or our race, it's also on us to be mindful of what we're walking into, right? Like I can't, if you know you're going to be driving a car, you got to wear a seatbelt, right? If you're going to be riding a skateboard, you should be wearing a helmet. So my point is that it doesn't mean that we don't go in those environments. It doesn't mean that we don't accept some of the risk that comes with it, but it's not okay. We don't agree that it's okay, but we also have to live, right? We also have to pave the way and push the boundaries. And I think transparency and honesty about the issues that we deal with, and things are so much better now than they were 25 years ago, but they're still not good enough. I think having those open and honest discussions is extremely important, but I also think preparing yourself for what you're going to walk into is also important, because that way you've already kind of buffered yourself a little bit. I'm sure we all do that to some degree, right? When we walk out in America, right? It's not the best answer, but I think it's the most honest answer, and it's the best thing that we can do today, right? Prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally, and also share our stories with people that are in places of power.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Kindly unmute Mr. Yomi. I think it's from Nigeria. You called in from Nigeria.
Oh, no, it's me.
Yomi, how are you, darling? That's my baby.
Fine. Hey, Femi, wonderful talk. Glad to hear it. So I was thinking about what you were saying, and I was also thinking about like the awareness part of it. I wanted to ask though, like, with trauma can be, like you said, very diverse, and people react in different ways. And I feel sometimes some people don't even know, so they don't even get to that awareness part of it. So my question is, when can you apply your model pretty much, and when should you, instead see someone for this, like a therapist or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I think everybody should have a therapist, honestly. Like, everybody should have a therapist. I'm not exaggerating.
I agree.
I think it's important to be able to talk to somebody that's a professional that can really hear about your problem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Good? Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I think it's important to be able to, so all of you on this call, and it's not just a thing for you guys, anybody can do this. I have a website, healthreal.com, and healthreal is spelled R-E-E-L, not R-E-A-L. Healthreal.com. You can do a free health assessment there. There's a mental health assessment. For those of you that are familiar, we use the DOS-21 for that, depression, anxiety, and stress score. Anybody can use it. It's free. It's 21 questions. It takes about 3 minutes to do. And then we have an algorithm that analyzes a video. If you upload your video, keep in mind, no human is going to see it. It's all done through AI and neural network, and you'll get a full, complete health assessment. Now, I created this because many people are going to see data that they've never seen about themselves before, which can be shocking. And the first thing they always want to say when they don't like what they see is, oh, that's wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's just, you've never seen it before. And that can be traumatic in a sense. So having some type of data that is assessing and teaching you, Yami, I think it's gonna kind of make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up a little bit and make you think like, this is a little bit different. And my suggestion is not that we take self-help on our own all the time, but we should be involved in it on our own in some level. And we should absolutely seek professionals anytime we have a question, from nutrition to therapy. I'm for all of it. And the bottom line is that because people mask and we all are not all equally aware, it's important that we proliferate this type of thinking. It's important that we share this to make it ubiquitous, because you don't know what you don't know. And there's no way to make you know it until someone starts talking to you about it. Sometimes it's just a light bulb going off. You know what I mean? There's no magic bullet. There's no cure all. That doesn't exist. And unfortunately, there are going to be people out there, and there are probably few of them, but no matter how much you share the truth with them and tell them the honest to God truth about something, they just don't have the ability to get it. And that's unfortunate for them. That they're just never going to get it. But guess what? There's a lot of people that when you tell them something for the first time. So Yami, you and I were talking about blockchain and digital assets on Saturday night, right? And there were things about digital assets in the blockchain that completely blew my mind, that I had not heard, but someone told it to me this one way and it clicked, right? So for sometimes when it comes to trauma and when it comes to masking and when it comes to awareness and self-awareness and selflessness, they've never heard it before. So once they've heard it, they can't unhear it. And I think most people, especially if your intentions are good and you're striving for perfection, knowing you'll never attain it, they're going to learn something about themselves. They're going to take this little list of things that I talk about with survival events, and they're going to go survive first, then assess, then learn, then deploy, then share. And guess what? They're going to know when they didn't learn something or they didn't deploy it. They're going to be stuck on that. They're going to keep working on it. So the only way sometimes, hey, I didn't know how to do long division until I got the second grade, right? But once I learned it, hey, I can't unlearn it now, right? That sometimes it's just that simple. But there's no magic bullet though, and I hope my answer is a good enough one. It's the best answer I can give.
Absolutely. I do agree that everybody should have a kind of
Thank you so much. Thank you, my sis Monique. Monique, you can unmute.
Hi. Okay. Hi. I may have heard the answer indirectly, especially as you just said about everyone should have a therapist. But my question is, how do you not allow repeated trauma make you live in fear?
Hey, that is a beautiful question. So I don't know if you missed the beginning of what I said, but
I missed a large chunk. I logged on late.
Okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm so glad that you brought it up, because I said something in the beginning that ties back to what you said. And what I said is that there's three things that really lead to trauma and lead to repeated trauma. It's falsehoods, fear, and frustration.
Oh, okay.
Those three things, in my opinion, are kind of the bane of almost all negativity that happen. And the truth of the matter is that everyone handles fear differently. Some of us get fearful, and it's in our nature to attack fear and be like, I don't want to be afraid of this. I got to do it over and over again. And then others of us will say, you know what? I'm afraid of that. I don't ever want to do that again. I will avoid it at all costs, right?
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, and let's use COVID as the example. Look, I'm not going to tell and I'm just going to talk about me right now. Nobody needs to share anything about themselves. I'm going to be honest here. I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. I have not gotten COVID. I've seen 1 million people around me get COVID who are against vaccines. People almost died, but they still don't want to listen to me. Hey, you know what? That's if they want to believe that, that's up to them. But guess what now? These people don't want to leave the house. They don't want to re-engage back into the real world. At some point, you have to make a cost-benefit analysis based in reality, not based on fear, not based on misinformation, not based on frustration. It has to be a real cost benefit analysis on life. Like, do I want to let this thing be over my head for the rest of my life? Like, because people don't think that way. They just think from 1 minute to the next, which in my opinion is a mistake. You have to have a telescope and a microscope. You know what I mean? You got to be able to switch back and forth between both. And the reality of it is that uncertainty makes people tap into falsehoods, fear, and frustration. Another example that I'll give you. I was at the stoplight the other day, and it was construction. And I got so dang angry that I did a U-turn in the middle of the street. And right as I did my U-turn, they let the traffic go through. All I had to do was be patient, but I wasn't patient. I let my own frustration get in my way. And guess what? It took me 10 minutes to get around the harbor that day. I ended up being late anyway. That was my fault. I let my own frustration get in my way.
Did you get a ticket?
I did not get a ticket. Thank you. But I did shoot myself in the foot, though, because I got frustrated. You know what I mean? So frustration, fear, and falsehoods lead us to make decisions that are not smart. And we have to be able to, this goes back to survival events, right? Fear, the trauma from a survival event is fear. That can be one of the outcomes. The thing is, you have to recognize that it's fear, not like a real, the thing that is important is not the fear, actually, because the fear is what's going to actually lead to more trauma. It's going to lead to a repeat of the same event. Yes. What you have to figure out is, what is it that I'm avoiding and why am I avoiding it? Like, that to me is really the question. And I'm sure that we can all be put into different situations. And like I said, survival events and trauma is not to be told to anyone. It's not my job to tell you what a survival event is or what your trauma is. It's for you to tell me and for me to listen. And if I can help you based on my own survival events and trauma, maybe there's a way out. Or you self-actualize in a way where you overcome it and you share it with me and I share it with the next person, and so on and so forth. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was. Thank you.
You're welcome. I see Monique has a question. Monique Williams has a question. I grew up with a girl named Monique Williams. So hi, Monique.
She's the one who just asked the question.
You just answered my question.
Oh, that was you?
Thank you so very much.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't realize that was you. I apologize.
Thank you. No worries.
Still raised. So
sorry.
Just before we still have some more questions in the chat box, and somebody raised their hand. I think Dr. Eniola did, and then put it down. Madam VP is still there. She still has not asked that question. But in our society, especially African society, you just touched a very, very touchy point.
Yep.
Seeing a counselor is like the kiss of death for most of us. Me, example. It took meetings after meetings of my children to get me to say, look at myself and say, look, you need to talk to someone. It's just something we don't accept. And trauma, we get trauma over and over again. The beginning of this year, it was like a trauma session. I thank God things that calm down. Trauma comes in different ways. People you have relationship with that you trust and then turn on you.
Yes.
Lies told, those are traumatic events. But in our culture, we take it and move on. In fact, if you share with some people, they'll tell you, hey, brush it off and get over it. But no, we have a counselor, an amazing counselor on this forum tonight. And I know she's going to hate this, but I'm calling her out because I have referred so many people to this woman who I call sister. She will not charge a dime when I refer them. Children, she will go to their homes. Children, adults, what have you. She has lives. Counseling is important. Rosemary, please unmute. I'm sorry. Oh, she got off the camera. She was on camera. Unmute and get back on camera, please. We've got to appreciate you. We have to appreciate you.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for all you do.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Femi. Thank you so much. I have learned so much from you today. Thank you. And Dr. O.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. I call you early in the morning. I've called you at like 6:37 because somebody has an emergency, mental health breakdown.
Yes.
And you drop everything and you're there. Counseling is important. It is okay. We've got to address this trauma. Thank you so much, Femi. This subject is so huge.
Yeah, Olu was asking me a question about the relevance of mindfulness and defensiveness. Yeah, I think, you know, I used myself as the example previously, and I'll start with defensiveness first. Defensiveness is a reaction to what we interpret as a survival event. But remember in my acronym PROOF, the PROOF acronym, the P is positive trauma. I think a lot of times when people are trying to help us, we get defensive because it's trauma and we don't recognize that it's positive trauma, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely people that want to see us fail and they want to act like they're helping us, but they're really not. They're probably putting us down and they're doing other things. But I think, you know, deep down, we know when someone has good intent and we know when someone has ill intent. And I don't have time to focus on negative people or people that don't want the greater good for others. So we just know who they are. But when people are kind of delivering us news that we need to hear, we should have grace and we should know that their intent is to help us. And I think when I think of it that way, it took me years to get this because I always felt like people were telling me what I can't do. And I always wanted to prove to them that I could always exceed their expectations, which is kind of a good thing. But sometimes those people were on my side. They were on my team. They were trying to help me, right? So I think defensiveness is one of those character traits that I call, it falls into the trauma category of the trauma we cause ourselves, right? Remember that PROOF acronym is positive, random, occupational. The trauma we cause ourselves. Defensiveness is self-inflicted trauma, in my opinion. In regard to mindfulness, mindfulness is a branch on the tree of awareness, right? I think the more mindful you are, the less likely you are to be defensive. And I also believe that no matter how mindful you are, no matter how graceful you are, we're all going to have a bad day, right? We're all going to show some side of ourselves that we don't like because we got defensive or reactionary. And the most important thing you can do when that happens is just apologize and say, hey, you're trying to help me. I didn't handle that well. But also too, I think when we're trying to help people, it's also important to keep in mind, it's not what we say, but it's how we say it. And I have a big problem a lot of times, like, I'm not really a jokester. Like, I'm not the person who likes to make jokes and have someone be the butt end of my joke to the benefit of a room. I'm not a big fan of that. There's a lot of people that like to teach that way. They like to make jokes and make people look bad. And I'm not a fan of that personally. I don't think that works very well. So I think it's also important to keep in mind that when we're helping people, that we all have different thresholds for what we think is funny. And I see a lot of lessons that could be extremely good ones if we just had a little more empathy and didn't always try to make things funny. I just think there's a time and a place for really teaching and getting on the ground floor with someone. Like, you know, when I talk to kids, I like to get right to their level. I like to come, like, get down on my knee and get right eye to eye with them. You know, I don't want to be this big, intimidating person. The analogy of that, right? That's a human nature type thing. I mean, you know, get eye to eye with somebody, you know, get on the ground with them and really try to understand where they're coming from. I think that's a great mindfulness character trait to have. And I also think that when it comes to dealing with defensiveness, I think as the more mindful we get, the less defensive we get. And hopefully I brought that full circle.
Thank you. You know, there's a question here by Remy that says, how does expectation fit into the dynamic of what you just talked about? External and internal.
Yeah. So I think that expectations are good, right? Because I think we should all have goals. But I also, you know, we all must keep in mind too that we don't have full control of every goal that we want, right? There's going to be a lot of random things that could happen between where we are now and where our goal is. And we have to be flexible and understand that the universe might have a different plan for us and that we might get to where we want to, but that's just a matter of staying the course and being determined and having self-belief, right? So, there's a lot of places that I've ended up that it was my goal, but I didn't necessarily get there how I thought I would or when I thought I would. And when it comes to like externalities, sometimes you just have to surrender and understand that like I can't control everything. And how does trauma and these survival events, these external things, how do they play in how I analyze my goal and how I get to my goal, right?
Wow.
That's how I see it. And then when it comes to like the internal part, I think the internal part is that little voice in the back of your head that tells you to stay the course, that kind of talks you through the process so that you don't give up, that you stay positive, that you maintain the program, like you maintain everything you set out to do, and that there's a discipline and a repeat rinsing of things that you have to kind of do over and over again. And what I'll say is this, when it comes to success, and I'll use obvious success because I think we all have different levels of success or what is successful for us. But what I've seen in football, in the NFL especially, and I think this translates to music and acting as well, there are people that got several doors slammed in their face. They're living in their car. They're sleeping on someone's couch, but they never gave up. And now they're the best in the world at what they do because they never gave up. What I see a lot of times is people have a dream, they have an idea, but the minute it gets real tough, they bail out. And unfortunately, maybe they had what it took to be really good, but they didn't really sacrifice enough to get there. So that kind of internal discussion you need to have with yourself, it's part self-belief, part staying the course, and part survival events, right? Like navigating how these survival events are thrown at you and how you manage them. And I think if you follow this kind of rubric that I've laid out in regard to survival events and how you read them, and then you support that lever with the next lever and the next lever and the next lever, I think you're building a really solid foundation to do anything you want, big or small, by yourself, with your partner, with your family, with your coworkers. I think that it's adaptable and mutable to whatever you need it to be, as long as you're honest with yourself. That's what I believe.
Thank you. Wow. So Dr. Oluwole Ajagbe actually had a backup to that question he asked about mindfulness and defensiveness. He said, extend your explanation to overreaction.
Yeah, so I would say that overreaction and defensiveness are branches on the same tree, in my opinion. Maybe they're not exactly the same, and maybe there's different things that trigger them, but the bottom line is that they're both not good responses, right? And I think sometimes when and this goes back to what Monique was talking about, when we're afraid, and what I said earlier about frustrated, or when we're listening to false information, or we don't have all the information, we tend to overreact, right? And I think that when we're put into a highly volatile, fast-moving, unknown, uncertain situation, we can overreact. But I'll tell you this, though. In my opinion, overreaction is another negative response that can still be quelled by following the rubric: assess, survive, assess, learn, deploy, and share. It still stands up in my opinion. So it's not on accident that I have a very simplistic way of challenging almost any negative thing, whether it's an overreaction, a survival event, or defensiveness on your own part, right? I still think that the rules that I'm talking about, and rules isn't the right word, but the lever, this survival event lever, this mindfulness awareness lever, right? Those two together, I think they can get you through most things. Now, we all know there's some things that there's no book for, right? There's some events that are just so ground shaking and so crazy, like what's happening in Ukraine. Like, there's just things that we're just not prepared for. And those are like life altering, crazy events. And I'm sure some of us on this have been through some of those events in our lifetime. And sometimes it's just time, right? Time and belief in, you'll get past it. And there's a certain way that you approach all trauma, no matter how big it is, right? I mean, the bottom line is that if you're ever going to get past it, you just kind of have to accept some of the things that come with really, really traumatic events. And like I said, I think talking to people, this is why I said previously that we should all have a therapist, because sometimes only a professional can get you through some things. And if you look at what's happened with COVID, especially with kids with anxiety and depression, I think a lot of kids have benefited from dealing with therapists and psychologists. And it's probably going to be a thing that in the long run, as these kids get older that have lived through this pandemic, I think they're going to be more sensitive and empathetic for their own kids down the road, should they end up with some similar need.
Thank you. Dr. Eniola Ogumefun, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Femi. Yeah, I just want to, how will you, I mean, do you think there's a kind of correlation between our mindset and also our sense of what we describe as or experience as trauma, mindset and trauma? What will you say about that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think mindset is a tool in our toolkit to manage trauma, right? Now, we can cause trauma, or trauma can be caused on us, right? I think trauma is tied to this concept of survival events. And mindset, right, are these 4 levers. This idea that you need to survive, you need to assess, you need to learn, you need to deploy, and you need to share. You need to have good information. You need to communicate effectively. You need to be self-aware and selfless. And then you need to take care of yourself, right? You need to eat right. You need to sleep. You need to make sure that you're doing the things that giving your body what it needs to perform at its best. And as I said before, I know that based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, the most important thing is shelter first, right? Food, having good people around you. Like I know that those things are the most important, but as we climb up that ladder, that self-actualization ladder, I think it's really important to keep in mind that there is a mindset, a positive mindset, a talk back in our heads that we can sharpen, and it gets better the more that we lean into it. So I think having this following these kind of guidelines will help you deal with trauma more effectively. It might not stop you from having trauma, because I think trauma is just part of life, but I think this mechanism will serve you when trauma shows up.
Thank you. So Dr. Adewale Okoyemi said, how does self-talking play out in self-actualization?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad that question came up, because I think I touched on it a little bit. When I'm by myself, I talk to myself a lot, actually. Like,
you don't answer yourself, though.
Huh?
You don't answer yourself, right?
Say it again.
You said you talk to yourself a lot when you're alone. I said, but you don't answer yourself.
You don't
No. I do answer. I know you're right. Well, maybe I do answer myself. You know what? Next time I do it, I'm going to see if I answer myself. I think that self-talk, like, I think what I find myself doing, and once again, it could be out loud or it could just be in my mind. Like when I do something that's like stupid, like I'll just sit there and I'll just be like, why did I do that? Like literally, I'll say it out like, why did I do that? And then I'll think about why I did it. And then I'll think about what I need to do to correct it. And if it's something only I know that didn't affect anyone else, it's just me doing a U-turn when I didn't need to. All I had to do was wait another 5 seconds. Just reminding myself that you're going to be in that situation again, probably in a week or two, because there's always construction down here in Harbor East. You're going to be in that same predicament. Are you going to be patient, or are you going to do another bonehead maneuver, which could cause an accident or get you a ticket or get in someone else's way or cause some problem for someone else? Or are you going to be patient? And I think just what I showed you there, that's an example of self-actualization. That's an example of recognizing something that I should have handled better. No one knew that I did it other than the people behind me, probably in the car, who I may never see again, but I knew that it was wrong, and I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, and I know it didn't serve me well. So I think sometimes like this self-talk in our heads, or even out loud, whatever floats your boat, there's, either or. I think it helps kind of go through the process of landing on what is a better decision than the decision that I made, which in my opinion, right, this idea of moving toward more optimization and self-actualization, right? I think self-talk is moving toward that, because the alternative is not to have self-talk, is to not recognize it or challenge yourself to do better. So I think self-actualization and self-talk go hand in hand.
Thank you. So, a counselor, I have a question for you. Rosemary.
Yeah, I just want to expatiate on that self-talk, because we all talk to ourselves all the time. Depending on what you're communicating with yourself, it can be positive, it can be negative. We have to remember that, the Bible says, I'm going to bring the Bible in here. It says, as the man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You will be and become the way you think and believe about yourself. So, if you like yourself, because the first thing you have to do is to, know who you are. Extremely important. If you know who you are and you have dealt with your own issues, you accepted what you want to accept, you're forgiving yourself and forgiving others, or allow others to forgive you and stuff like that, you'll be able to communicate good stuff with yourself, because knowing that those things that you are communicating with yourself have an impact on you, because whatever you think about, you bring about. So we have to be very careful who we think about at all times. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And actually, I'm looking for this deck that I have, and I'm probably not going to find it now. I should have moved it to the top of my inbox, because I knew it was going to come up tonight, but it came up now toward the end. There's an area in the deck where I break out awareness. And one of the bullet points in awareness is be true to who you are, know who you are. Because you can't help anyone else if you don't know who you are and help yourself first, right? So I wish I would have broke it out. I wish I could have, because there's probably 9 or 10 different bullet points around awareness and self-awareness, and that we can't really help anybody until we help ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect with ourselves, right? It doesn't mean that. It just means that there's a level of awareness and understanding about what I need. And it's kind of like, when you get on the plane and they say, put your, if pressure changes, you put your mask on first and then you put on your kid's mask. Like that's true. Like you got to put on your own mask or seatbelt first before you try to help anybody else. And it's okay to say, like, you know what? I can't even help myself right now. I don't know if I can help you. You know what I mean? Like that's okay. Like everybody can't help everybody all the time. It takes a big person to say, like, I'm not in a good place right now. Like, hey, I need help. Like, let me get my stuff together. And then, because I think life is like that, right? Like we're not always perfect all the time. And I could think of numerous things throughout my life that were very difficult, that I was so in my head on, that I wasn't in a place to help anybody. I was very selfish at that time, but that's what I needed to be to find my way. And once I did, it was so empowering. And then I could tell my story. I could talk about my survival story, right? My survival event, because some survival events are a minute long, some are 10 years long. Now, it didn't mean I couldn't help people at all in anything, but it just meant there's some places that I needed help in that I'm not qualified, nor should I be helping anybody in. It takes a big person to acknowledge that, because we all know there's people giving advice that shouldn't be giving anybody advice. We know them. We know those people. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it can be very challenging when we get the wrong information. And like I said, and I hate to be redundant about this, because it's so fitting how it works. The reason the second lever is quality information and quality communication is because bad information can set people really far back. And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I don't have the answer for that. There's someone else that you could probably find that answer from. I don't have it. I love being able to say I don't know, because you know what it makes me do? It makes me go learn something else. I love that part.
Thank you. Abby, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Again, I wanted to just highlight how, today has just been it's been such a blessing. I think that it's been one of the most, most needed for me. I don't remember, Mommy, you might remember, but Dr. Rosemary, she had said something on, I think it was like maybe 2 months ago or something like that, on Medical Mondays, and we're talking about parent and relationships between parents and children. And obviously there's a lot of parents on this platform, and shout out to Dr. O, because obviously we've had to have conversations with her, and she's been open to therapy, and it's been great, but she's just one out of a billion other parents who are not even open to that conversation. And for me, I feel like, the topic that day, Dr. Rosemary had said, look, you guys have to, develop relationships with your children, and this, that, and the other. She had touched on a lot of things, advising the parents. And I wanted to just say, like, a lot of parents don't realize, like, their unhealed trauma from like their childhood or whatever is one of the main reasons why they have like really broken relationships with their children. It's not like their children are not, trying to hang out with them or talk to them. It's just, you haven't really made it a safe space for them to be able to talk to you, because you haven't dealt with your trauma from like when you were 15 or 10 or whatever. And these things matter. And, Femi saying, look, everybody needs a therapist. I don't care who it is. I agree 100%. I agree that you need to talk to somebody, you need to talk to a professional, and just, try to find a way to work through these things that you don't think were a problem, but they really are. And they kind of like, guide how your life, I guess, ends up, how you relate with people. That little event with your parents, how they related with you when you were a child, and now you don't have a relationship with your child. You're wondering, oh, why is my child like this? But yeah, it's you. And, the adults.
Abby, you muted yourself.
Okay. You muted, Abby.
Yeah, I think that I don't know what happened, but I think that it's very important. I hope that everybody here takes at least that one, point of seeing a therapist and working through their childhood trauma. I hope that they work on that, because I think it's a big thing, especially between parents and, and their children, and having like a healthy relationship with their kids.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Dr. Izugu has said, please discuss handling trauma from pride/ego, which blinds many.
Yeah, so it's really funny. I think pride was one of the first emotions that I knew about myself that I didn't want to become a problem. And I think I had a coach tell me, don't let your pride get in the way of your progress. And it stuck with me. It always resonated with me. And I think that, pride or ego is basically you getting in your own way. I don't ever want something negative to happen or to lose out on an opportunity because my pride and my ego wouldn't let me come back to the table or let me have a discussion with somebody. So I think that, pride and ego are the antithesis of self-actualization. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. You know what I mean? I think self-actualization allows somebody to see one's intent. And even if someone does say something to you that minimizes or diminishes your skill set or your work product or your deliverables, or maybe they just don't know. Maybe they haven't had enough experience with you to really see your true value. So I think that for me, the way that I learned to handle what would lead me to be prideful or have an ego is, all right, let me just show them. Let me assume that whatever they're thinking about me or whatever decision they've made, although it's minimized me and might be disrespectful in some way, maybe that's really how they view me. And what I can do to show that they're wrong is to rise above it. And instead of leaning back, let me go ahead and lean in. And it served me so well so many times, because I don't think the person in most cases had any ill intent. They just didn't know any better. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. My sister Wumi from California, Sister Wumi Kamsen, kindly ask your question.
I actually just wanted to add to the conversation about mental health. And I'm not sure who Abby's mom is. Abby said something about my mom.
That is me.
Oh,
that's
okay.
My daughter.
All right, my dear sis.
That's my daughter.
So I just wanted to add that my daughter actually gave me information about mental health. She's a Master's of Public Health student. When she was going through her program, I remember her calling me and saying, "Mom, I'm going to go see a shrink." But she didn't really say shrink, but I just assumed it was a shrink. "I'm going to go see a psychologist." I was flabbergasted. I was actually scared. I'm like, "What happened? Are you okay?" Da, 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 da. She goes, "Mom, no, it's part of my program. I need to do it." But I was still concerned. But because of that, and this was about 4 years ago. So we sat down, we talked about it. She goes, "Mom, I'm fine. But this is just something that the program said we have to do, and we all have to do it." So I'm just appealing to all my fellow seasoned mothers and fathers over there on the forum. Please, 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 we need to do this. We all have baggages that we carry. Like Abby mentioned, we need to do it. We need to take mental health as because we go to see a doctor. Every year I do my physical around my birthday time. So you go to the doctor for your physical health, your body. But this is for our head, for our mind, for our mental wellness. We all need to do this. And I think the sooner we start doing it, the sooner we start focusing on that, the better we will all be for ourselves, for our children, for our family, for the community as a whole. So I just wanted to add to that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, from where I sit, they say physicians are the worst patients. What I came to conclusion on is that everybody has some kind of mental health issue.
Absolutely.
It could be huge, it could be small, it could be whatever. But everybody does. That's been my experience. And it took me so long to realize that. Everybody needs somebody.
True. Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
Everybody needs somebody. Thank you.
And those.
Madam VP. Now Madam VP is back.
Oh, and excuse me, I just wanted to commend Mr. Ayanbadejo. Thank you so much for your presentation. I should have said that first before I started talking. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I am getting, I'm getting private chats telling me that Femi, you are awesome, that you're so knowledgeable. Let me read on that. You have a complete control I'm missing it, that you have amazing knowledge of the subject matter. I'm getting, different private chats on that. We are really blessed. Yeah. People are getting blessed on the platform.
Well,
So,
I think that for me, I really enjoy this stuff because I know that it's really wild how indelible the effect of COVID. I think that a lot of us are a lot more open to sharing a lot more things as a result of COVID. Yes. And I think that I was already on this trajectory anyway, because I think that, people have this idea of how they think I'm going to be. And then when they see I'm completely different, it's not like, I know I've been in my body a long time. I know how I'm perceived, and I know how people see me post having a discussion on any topic. And I really believe that what's really helped me process information and come up with this approach has been being vulnerable, being honest with people about my thoughts, my feelings, my concerns, listening to them. I think that and obviously there's a lot of Nigerians on this call, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that we all know that
Ghanaians and
a lot of
African Americans.
Of all walks. But what I mean though is that I think that we ourselves as a community and as people, we protect ourselves. it's not always natural to be vulnerable. It's not always natural to share our concerns or our thoughts or our feelings, right? And I don't think that you can really get to know somebody or build trust with people if you're not willing to put yourself under the same microscope that you're asking them to. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that I'm saying to you that I haven't done already. You know, when I say you got to have a telescope and a microscope, is you got to be able to see inward and see outward into the distance, that everything you're doing is going to lead to a conclusion. Now, you might not know exactly where it's going to end up, but you have some aspirations about it. You do have a say in it. It's not random or on accident. But if you're not mindful about the good things that you do or the negative things or the bad things that you do, then you're just not really paying attention. And then you're not being self-aware. So I think that I appreciate the kind comments, and I appreciate that people are digging like what I'm saying a little bit, because it really is kind of like my life's work. It's like my life lessons condensed into this rubric, this concept of these 4 levers, this self-health concept, this falsehood, fear, frustration, reaction that leads to a really bad stuff, you know? And so I'm glad that if you guys remember any part of it and you share it with people, then you're doing exactly what aspirationally, I mean, I hope for it.
And thank you so much for sharing such personal things and on that personal level with us on this forum. We appreciate you. Thank you. Madam VP, take the floor, man.
Well, I'm just going to make a comment because some of my questions have already been asked. But, you know, great job, Mr. I can't see his name. The gentleman. Dr. Femi. Great job. Ayanbadejo. That's a long Nigerian name.
Obafemi, he has the same name as one of your sons, Obafemi.
I can say Obafemi. Yeah, but you know what? When you started your presentation, you know, you came from the perspective of person-centeredness. That look, it's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. You know, one thing doesn't work for everybody, and that's what I really love about this. But as we come into an end, I'm hearing people say everybody should go see a shrink, everybody should do this. I don't think that everybody should do all of that. Whoever needs that kind of help, you have provided enough information. We grew up from a different, I mean, it depends on your age group, but we grew up from a different genre in which, you know, we all sought counsel, but it wasn't paid counsel. You had somebody that you trusted, that you would spill your gut to, and they will guide you. And, you know, sometimes you needed people to just listen. You don't even need advice. You feel good already by just telling it all to somebody. But like Dr. O said, you got to be careful and only share what you're comfortable with sharing with whom, because there's a trust issue also right now. We have social media. You say things to people. Maybe that's why the younger people feel safe to go pay a shrink, because that person is under oath not to divulge the situation. You also touched on self-talk or thinking out loud. That's probably how some people regulate themselves. So I don't think that everybody needs the same thing, but I'm glad that you touch on every area and you know, that account for unique context for individual challenges. But what I mostly agree with you, which is probably still a question for me, is the self-awareness. People might be agnostic about the issue that they're dealing with. So they're not, they can't even process they're not in denial, but I don't know another word for it. Okay? They're not in denial, but they're not accepting that that is the issue. I have 4 children, and I have one of them before I say one thing. Yes, I know. Yeah, Mom, I know.
Sounds familiar.
But that issue is not going to change. Before you say, I know what you're going to say. So how do you, do I need to go see a shrink to deal with this child, or what do you do?
Yeah, well, how old is this child that you're talking about?
This child is over 20.
Okay, well.
So not a child.
Yeah, well, like I said early on, I think self-awareness is different. We all start at different places. There's, and I'll use athleticism, or we can use intelligence. We can use some kids. Whitney Houston came out of the womb being able to sing. Like she could just sing. I'll never be able to sing. I just can't sing. It's not in my DNA. You know what I mean? And it takes self-awareness for me to recognize that, right? I think some people have less of it. And it could take direct conversation from, like you said, I totally agree with what you're saying in regard to, you don't need to pay a therapist necessarily, which I agree with you if you want to. But if you have a trusted mentor, a trusted friend, a trusted advisor that can help you get through a situation through discussion, then more power to you. But some things take a professional. Some things take a doctor, like a PhD or a doctorate or a medical doctor, right? When it comes to some mental health issues, those people definitely need to see a professional. Now, when it comes to the idea of self-awareness, I think that it isn't one size fits all, and we all don't get the same amount of it, unfortunately. We all know people that no matter how many times they do something or talk about something or see something, for some reason, they're just detached from it. They just are. Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They just are. And I wish I could say everyone's going to get some self-awareness at some point. No, some people aren't. What you see is what you get. They're not going to figure it out. And that's just the nature of the difference between humans, right? We're all given different things. We all have different skill sets and tools and coping mechanisms. My hope is that through open discussion and sharing, right? Because the number one thing in the lever of survival events, the last thing is sharing. It's the greatest example. The cathartic outcome or effect of sharing is self-actualization in that lever. And some people, unfortunately, may never get there. But it doesn't mean we don't stop trying to impart some tools to them to help them become self-aware, because it's not for me to say, if somebody can never do something. It's just a matter of how do we get them to sort of at least attempt to try to learn how to do it. And we're getting into some real detailed small things here. I want to be careful of not going down a rabbit hole. And Madam Laura, I think that you're right. I tried to create this in a way that is not one size fits all, that there's room for variance and variation, and also the ability to say some people may never get it. And we know that's how the real world is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jagbe has a question here. He keeps throwing one at you, back and forth. He said, how does denial play out in the scheme of self-actualization?
Yeah, I think I answered that. No, did I answer that one? Okay. I think, well, I'll touch on it real quick, because I think that denial, ego, defensiveness, negativity, my response to all those kind of negative reactions is all kind of the same. Pride and ego, they don't serve you. You know what I mean? So, maybe denial isn't maybe denial is a little more subtle of a negative reaction than some of the other ones that are more obvious. Because in denial, you can just sit back and just say, yeah, okay, and walk away and not agree with any of it. You're in denial. Hey, you are not aware. You're not picking up what this person is trying to put down for you to pick up, I think that there's not really, once again, a magic bullet to get people to understand they're in denial. At some point, they have to apply the rules of trauma and the rules of survival events, which is, you survived, did you assess, did you learn, did you deploy, and did you share? And if they ask themselves those 5 questions, they're going to have to be able to say no, that they didn't. And they're going to have to ask themselves why they didn't. Is it denial? Is it pride? Is it ego? What's the reason? That's very much an internal self-discussion that one has to have. And it takes self-awareness to recognize that. And once again, we all know people that end up in the same predicament over and over and over again. And denial can be one of those reasons. It takes, like, we almost, once again, we have a network of people, we have a support group of people that can help us to a certain point. But at a certain point, a person must help themselves to really reap the rewards and the benefit of a supporting set of people. You know what I mean? Like, they have to be involved in their own benefit. They have to be participating in their own outcome. And if they're not, then it's kind of a waste of everybody's time. If they don't want to engage in the event that's going to help them, which denial can lead to them not participating, at some point you just have to say, hey, I love you. I'll be here when you're ready. Let me know when you're ready. I'll be here waiting for you. You know?
Right.
That's it. It's kind of sad, but that's the truth. Dr. O, you're muted.
Thank you so much. That is the truth, I said. And when somebody's in denial, they cannot even begin to tackle any solution, or, they stuck. You have to come to realization first before you can, resolve anything or any issues. Dr. Craig said, you chose Bikram Yoga.
Yeah.
Instead of, say, Mahayana or Theravada. Any particular reason? I don't know if I pronounced them correctly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got it.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you why I chose that. So first of all of you familiar with Bikram and the mistakes he's made as a human being? Are you all familiar with that? Is anybody familiar with that? Okay.
No.
He has a warrant out for his arrest in the US. So he's not probably the best example, but I didn't know anything about Bikram, the person who created Bikram Yoga. I just heard, come to Bikram Yoga class tonight. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hot. You're going to get, it's going to help your back. I have an old back injury. So I went. And let me just say, and the reason why I'm bringing up Bikram is because I think that there are a lot of people that we can all say, we don't know them personally, but they created something beautiful. Could have been a song. It could have been an album. It could have been a painting. It could have been a book. It could have been a set of yoga postures. I don't condone the human being, but I do separate the art from the artist. And if I met him in person, I would probably have a problem with him. I just want to say that. Second, the reason I ended up doing Bikram Yoga was because somebody in my building, while I was doing my MBA at Hopkins, invited me to go. And so what's funny is that my neighbor, her name was Sabrina, and then my buddy, they both used to go to yoga together. They didn't know each other, but they both knew me. So all three of us went together. The funny thing is, I'm the only one still doing it. They both have quit, which is interesting. And the reason I stuck with it was because from football, I had an L4, L5 herniation in my lumbar spine, which I needed to get surgery for, but I didn't want to get surgery. I was having, numbness and tingling in my feet and in my fingers. And I was probably needed to get a discectomy, but I didn't want to have back surgery. I also had my foot reconstructed, and I also had my knee scoped. I needed microfracture surgery on my knee, but I didn't want to get that. So I got like a surgery that was more of like I guess you can call it a Band-Aid. It wasn't as invasive, but I was having problems.
Arthroscopy.
Yes. So I didn't want to get any more surgeries, and I had heard good things about the repetitiveness of Bikram Yoga. Once again, it's very hot, it's very humid, it's difficult. So I was getting a therapeutic benefit in regard to how it was affecting like my fingers and my toes. This is 9 years ago when I started this. My fingers and my toes, I have full range of motion, I have full strength, I have no numbness, I have no tingling. My back feels as good as it's ever felt. So it did help my injuries. But then I started to learn that there was actually a psychological benefit to it. And there was the same benefit that people get from meditation. I get that same benefit from Bikram Yoga. And I love that I can do it anywhere in the world and it's the same. For someone like me who's had a number of injuries and I know my body extremely well, I'm not the kind of person that's going to be like, come do this with me, come go bungee jumping with me, come go do this, come go do that. I'm like, no, I'm not doing any of that. I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to know if it's going to like tweak me or hurt me or do something odd to me. Because if people look at me, they would never have any idea that I ever had any injuries. And it's because I've taken care of them and I understand what I can't do and I know what I can do. So there is a safety in the repetitiveness of Bikram yoga. And there's an art in it that really allows me to be creative in my mind. And like I said, a lot of the things I'm sharing with you guys today, it started in Bikram yoga, me writing in my mind and then getting on my computer later and just dumping everything that was going through my head in that 90 minutes. It's the only 90 minutes in the day where it's completely quiet and I don't have any external things affecting me. It's just me thinking about what I want to create or design or what we need to build for the platform, or, you know, what obstacle do I need to overcome in the coming days, weeks, or months that's on my target list of things. I go through all that in Bikram yoga. I think about my kids in Bikram yoga. I think about my daughter going to high school. I think about so many different things in that class. And it's because I'm so comfortable in the meditation and in the movements because I know them so well. And even with that being said, the challenge to Bikram yoga is because people always want to be entertained. They want something new. The challenge is not doing something new. The challenge is getting better at what I am already doing. It's like finding a black belt, right? Like having my posture be better, you know, getting deeper in a posture, doing something in a posture that I've never done before. I know those sound like incremental little things, but they are a reward mechanism. They are a carrot in this whole thing that I do. And I find something that brings me back to it. I don't know how to explain it, but it works for me.
So you do this 90 minutes every day?
Sometimes twice a day. Yep, 90 minutes every day. I've been doing it every day for 4 years now. I started doing it 9 years ago. I started doing it 2 days a week, and then I went to 3 days a week, and then I went to 5 days a week, and now I basically do it every day.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's your me time also.
It is.
We all need to learn from that. So there are lots of comments here that I'm going to defer to Honorable Gustav, but there's one in particular that I want to take. Dr. Adewale Okweyemi said, "Thank you for the presentation. How to live well or handle life is the most important topic to mankind because we are created to dominate our environment. Most of us don't read. Most of us don't read the most important manual, the Bible. I found out it handles all human problems, spirit, soul, and body."
Awesome.
I 100% agree with them. And if I ever am able to do the Bikram yoga, it's scripture I'm going to be doing in there. You know, that is the solution to everything. So I wanted to take that one.
Thank you, Dr. O. Dr. Hannah in the frame says accountability and truth is what we need in health. Then one day it is resonating. Thank you for providing a different view on the awareness of different types of trauma. Madam Lola says, wow, I like that. Awareness being present at all times. You're good. Another comment from Dr. Anna, great information about trauma and how one should handle it. Bella says, awesome information and knowledge. Then another comment from Bella, very true. Richard Williams, very educative presentation. Thank you so much. And then Dr. Buka, good presentation. My daughter Abby echoed the same note. Everyone needs a therapist. She says, immigrant parents cannot raise children the way they grew up. That's a comment in the chat.
Yeah. And Dr. Ajagbe, as usual, the riot. He wrote conclusion should be WYSIWYG. Kindly unmute, sir, and let us know what that means. Dr. Ajagbe, sir, please unmute yourself and explain what you just wrote in the chat box.
No, I didn't just write it there. But what you see is what you get. And I think Obafemi alluded to it a few seconds ago. In everything that we, when we listen to such presentations, we have no choice but to internalize what we heard and process it and not be hypocritical or go around with all kinds of fluff. And that's what I meant by, what you see is what you get. If I can tell you the truth, which is one of the things that he alluded to earlier in the presentation, you have to be sincere in what you share with people. If you are not vulnerable enough to be able to tell the truth about the real situation, then you are going around with masks on. You'll be different people, a different person to different people at different times, and nobody knows who you really are. So in order for us to live the kind of healthy, self-aware, self-health and self-actualization kind of life, we must be who we are. And that is what I meant by what you see is what you get. Don't pretend and don't be hypocritical about, what the situation is. Many people like to hear themselves talking all the time, and they never embrace anything that requires change on their part, because they believe by talking too much, everybody should think that they are perfect, when in actual fact, they are far from it. So in order to be healthy, and when we are talking about self-health and self-actualization, you must be honest with yourself. You cannot be pretending and walking around, letting people think that you are who you are not. So that's what I mean by that.
Thank you, Dr. Ajagbe. Veronica comments, impressive lessons on mindfulness. Thanks. And then Dr. Famuyua says, fantastic presentation. I will be interested in sharing this with my fertility patients. And that leads us to Medical Monday moment.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing, fabulous. Femi, you blew me out of the water. I know what you're capable of. I know what the Lord has embedded in you. However, I didn't expect it to be this. Bang, beautiful. Thank you for blessing us. And my Medical Mondays moment was the period I had with you all on Saturday. All of you, my children, the ones that came from far and near, and everybody coming home, and we're just, just being ourselves and enjoying ourselves. I think it's important that as Femi takes 90 minutes during the day for his me time, we've been saying that we should take, 30 minutes. Femi, we've been talking on Medical Mondays that 30 minutes me time. 90 minutes is amazing. It's important that we do that, especially in this time of COVID, that we do that, and then to spend time with each other. Thank God the mask is coming down. I pray that it stays down and it stays out. We need to spend time with each other. Human beings need that connection. We need that relationship. Let's get together. Let's enjoy each other more. COVID should have taught us that life can be short. So the time we spend together is very important with each other. So my Medical Mondays moment is to encourage us to, stay strong, stay together, and spend time together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we leave, Femi, can you please give us a closing remark?
I'm sorry. You wanted me to do what?
Your closing remarks.
Oh, my closing remarks. Yes. Man, this was a lot of fun. When Dr. O and I were talking on Saturday, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to impart, but I was as I was thinking about what the most kind of relevant thing is, I could have pulled up my platform and talked about all these data points. It would not have been as much fun. I think that when it comes to trauma, information, communication, self-awareness, and then just health performance, like, you know, the nutrition, sleep, recovery, me time, meditation, we can all relate to that in one way or another. So I'm just happy that what I chose to talk about, it seems like it resonated on some level. I hope that you all continue the discussion with people in your circle, in your orbit, and you talk about survival events and you talk about trauma, and that lean into that. Like, don't be afraid of it. Don't let falsehoods, fear, and frustration lead to you making mistakes. I don't think that reacting to negativity with negativity is going to serve anybody well. So this turned out to be so much better than I anticipated, and I really appreciate you all leaning into it and asking as many questions as you did. It was great. Thank you.
Femi, you do consultations, right? You can be consulted. Correct?
Yeah, I put my email. So just to be completely transparent, I used to do a ton of coaching, and I did this all the time. And this is prior to finishing my MBA at Hopkins, when I jumped onto the more of the technology side, because I really wanted to scale my ideas. If anybody wants to talk about, you know, consulting, or if they want me to come talk to their business or their company or have some ideas, I put my email in the chat box. Anybody can reach out to and email me. I'd be happy to chat.
And I also put his website. Again, I reposted it for that free health assessment. I think we all should do it.
Thank you so much. We've been discussing self-help and self-actualization with Obafemi Devin Ayanbadejo, and he is the founder and CEO of a digital health startup, Health Real, and he's also a Super Bowl champion with the Baltimore Ravens. He actually showed that he's a real champion in this area of health.
Go Ravens! Go
Appreciate
Ravens!
you
Go Ravens!
so
Go
much. Great representation. Amazing.
Sorry, I think the Rams won Super Bowl.
Oh no, forget the Rams. It's Ravens any day.
Sorry, Femi. Sorry.
No, hey, it's okay. Last season is over. We're looking forward to 2022.
Exactly.
I was gonna say, for those of you that are on social media, I use Instagram and Facebook quite a bit. If you want to follow me on Facebook, feel free to read. I'm sorry, on Instagram. My handle is @Obafemi30. That's my Instagram. And I use LinkedIn quite a bit too. There's so much great information on LinkedIn and so many great networks to be made. I have like 5 different ways I put my name out. So my whole name on LinkedIn is this. If you want to find me, it shouldn't be hard. It's Obafemi Devin Ayanbadejo Sr. That's how I'm on LinkedIn. So between those 2 things, you guys can find me very easily. So if anybody wants to chat, there you go.
Nice.
Thank you so much. And Dr. O, we appreciate you. Medical Mondays always comes up with great surprises and great interaction from all the participants. Thanks so much for staying with us. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit the like button and subscribe. Also, hit the notification button. Remember to watch all previous editions of Medical Mondays on YouTube. Till we come your way with another interesting topic. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night and God bless you.